on the topic, the importance of Sanskrit in Indian education. We would like to welcome here on the dais revered Swami Vedarthanandaji Maharaj, Acharya, Probationers Training Center, Ramakrishna Mat, I beg your pardon, Belur Mat. Maharaj, please.
Om Shuklam Brahma Vichara Paramam Adyam Jagadvyapinim Veena Pustakadharinim Abhayadam Jadyandhakarapaham Haste Sphatikamalika Vidadhati Padmasane Sangsthita Vande Tam Parameshwarim Bhagavatim Buddhipradam Sharadam. I offer my respectful pranams to revered Maharajis present here, respected teachers, guests, and dear students of our Vidyapith. I shall speak mostly in English. All of you understand English very much. But I shall speak a bit in Sanskrit also. Asya Vidyapithasya Pradhanadhyapakah Swami Divyasudhananda Maharajaha Mam Adishtavanasti Yat Kinchit Samskritam Maya Avashyam Vaktavyam Iti. Bhavantaha Sarvepi Atra Vidyapithe Samskritasya Adhyanam Kurvanti Ityaham Janami. Atayeva Bhavantaha Sarvepi Kinchitu Samskritam Avashyameva Avagachanti. Satyam. Apicha Samskritam Vishayikritya Khalu Idam Bhashana Satram Atra Pravrittam. Sanskritena Vagvinyasaha Asyaha Sabhayaha Shobham Nitaram Vardhaishyati. Tasmat Madhye Madhye Aham Manye Keshanchit Samskrita Vakyanaamapi Prayogaha Maya Kriyate. Tathapi Aham Yathochitam Avagamana Saukaryamapi Uddishya Angla Bhashaya Eva Mukhyataha Mama Vishayam Agre Prastomi. Pashantu, we know everything in this world has a reason and purpose to exist. There is a reason and purpose for everything to exist in this world, right? This may be just a belief. This is not a scientific truth. This may be just a cliche. But this is certainly a good hypothesis to begin with. So, let's assume Sanskrit also has a reason to exist in this world. But the question here is this: does Sanskrit language has any reason and purpose to be a part of India's present educational system? What are the goals and objectives of Sanskrit being part of our curriculum? What is the outcome of learning this language? Interestingly, these questions are not new. Sanskrit's reason, or Sanskrit's raison d'être, as it is called in French, Sanskrit's raison d'être, reason to exist as part of India's educational system, is very clearly stated by none other than Maharshi Patanjali. Maharshi Patanjali is a historical figure. We know, all of you must know him as a great teacher of yoga. He also contributed to Sanskrit grammar. He is the author of the celebrated work in Sanskrit grammar called Mahabhashyam. In the first chapter of Mahabhashyam, Maharishi Patanjali raises a question. He asks, Kani punaha shabdanushasanasya prayojanani? Kani punaha shabdanushasanasya prayojanani? Shabdanushasanam means teaching and learning Sanskrit through a systematic method. What are the objectives of learning Sanskrit, cultivating Sanskrit through a systematic method? What is the purpose of a systematic teaching learning process for Sanskrit? He asks. By raising this question, Maharishi Patanjali was justifying the need of cultivating Sanskrit through a systematic method of grammar. The justification he gives, the justification he intends to give is based on the purpose the Sanskrit education would serve. So he says, Kani punaha shabdanushasanasya prayojanani, and then he answers, Rakshohagama lagva sandehaha prayojanam. Rakshohagama lagva sandehaha prayojanam. A long samasa. Study of Sanskrit through a proper, correct grammatical method from the gurus serves a five-fold purpose. What are they? Raksha, Uha, Agama, Laghu and Asandeha. 5 prayojanas of cultivating Sanskrit knowledge as part of our curriculum. Now let's understand these 5 prayojanas of a systematic study of Sanskrit one by one by recasting them into our modern context. The first prayojana Patanjali speaks about is Raksha. Raksha is a common word in all Indian languages. It means protection, preservation. So, Raksha is the first prayojana of cultivating Sanskrit knowledge as part of our curriculum. Raksha means protection of Vedas, and through that preservation and propagation of the Vedic heritage. Idamasti, this is Idamasti Samskrita Adhyanasya Prathamam Prayojanam Maharishi Patanjalehe Matanusaram. Now the question is, why should we preserve the Vedas and the Vedic heritage? And again, how can Sanskrit, being a language, perform the raksha of this Vedic heritage? Vaidika paramparyam kimartham rakshaniyam. Vaidiki sanskritihi, Vaidiki pratna kirtihi, kimartham sarvatra vishve prasaraniya. Apicha samskrita bhasha katham Vaidika paramparyasya raksham kartum prabhavati. These are the questions. We can get the answer to these questions if we consider for a moment the geopolitics of different nations. See, language, any language is a very important, very influential cultural identity. Very often, language is a greater cultural identity than a religious identity. All of us, being from the north and eastern part of India, we know about the Mukti Juddho, the freedom struggle of Bangladesh, right? In 1971, Ekatturer Mukti Juddho. So what united East Pakistan, the present Bangladesh, against the West Pakistan? It was a language. It was not their religion. Language was deemed a very powerful and influential cultural identity for them than any religious identity they had. So what unites India, our country, into one entity? You would certainly say, it is not a language. It is our spiritual heritage rooted in the Vedic civilization which unites our country into one entity. In all other respects, including languages, We are steeped in diversity. But remember, this common rich heritage of our country has a very sweet and eloquent voice of expression, and that is Sanskrit. Our spiritual heritage speaks to us through Sanskrit. Bhashasu mukhya madhura ramya girvana bharati. Bhashasu samskrita nunam ramani artha bhashini. Which Indian tongue, language, other than Sanskrit has that unique status of being a pan-Indian language, an all-India language without any regional claim? Sanskrit. Just think from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Kutch to Kamrup, Kutch in Gujarat and Kamrup in northeast, with Kashi as the center. The cultural geography of India has Sanskrita Bhasha. The cultural geography of Bharatavarsha has Sanskrita Bhasha as its lingua franca, as its common language. In the Valmiki Ramayana, there is an interesting description. Bhagavan Sri Ramachandra from Ayodhya, when he went to Kishkindha in the south, Kishkindha is roughly in modern Karnataka. He spoke to Sugriv and Hanuman in Sanskrit. It is specially mentioned. Again, when Hanuman went to Lanka to visit Mother Sita, he thinks, Yadi vacham vadishyami dvijatiriva sanskritam ravanam manyamana mam Sita bhita bhavishyati. If I speak in Sanskrit to Mother Sita, before approaching Mother Sita, he is thinking, he is so intelligent. If I go as a monkey, I may be a great scholar, but Mother doesn't know me. Rama knows me. So if I go, suddenly produce myself in front of her and start speaking in Sanskrit, just like the scholars are in India, like Brahmins are, she won't believe me. She would think this is certainly Ravana who disguised himself and came in front of me. This indicates Hanuman could speak Sanskrit, Mother can understand Sanskrit, and again Ravan spoke in Sanskrit to Mother Sita. And again, many centuries later in the Kali Yuga, when Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya from the south came to northern India, he debated with Mandana Mishra and other scholars in Sanskrit. He taught his disciples who hailed from different parts of our country in Sanskrit. He wrote all his works in Sanskrit. Shankaracharya didn't write any book in Malayalam or in Tamil, his mother tongue. He wrote all his works in Sanskrit. Very interesting. Because he wanted this, the whole India should understand his message. Again, when Swami Vivekananda traveled throughout our country as an itinerant monk, he spoke, of course, in English to people who were educated in English, but the whole India didn't know English. He spoke to many scholars in Sanskrit. Even he spoke to women in many princely states in India through Sanskrit. And from the ancient times till today, when the people of our country want to pray to their gods and goddesses, we do that in Sanskrit. If India stops using Sanskrit, then God forbid, India as a nation would disintegrate. That is the power of Sanskrit. The Raksha, we are talking about the Raksha of our cultural heritage which unites India is a national obligation on our part. In order to effectively fulfill that obligation, every young citizen of this country should be educated on Sanskrit. Now we come to Uha. Rakshohagama Laghu Sandeha. The second prayojana is Uha. Uha usually means speculation or postulation. It has different connotations, but in this context, it stands for modification and adaptation. Now, Patanjali says, scriptural injunctions, most of our scriptural injunctions, the statements in the scripture, the decrees of our scriptures are in Sanskrit, we know. These scriptural injunctions can be appropriately modified only by a person who knows Sanskrit language. And that is Uha, according to Maharshi Patanjali. Since this is the case, we can easily understand the knowledge of Sanskrit can help us in modifying and appropriately changing the cultural ethos, the civilizational ethos, and the socio-religious institutions of this country to meet newly emerging needs and circumstances. This also is a meaning of Uha. Look, India's dharma in a sense of, in its widest sense I am speaking, India's dharma is not a stagnant, boring ritual, a repetition or a rehearsal of something remembered from the ancient past. Our civilization teaches us to recreate new narratives, to create new institutions even, to help us achieve our higher aspirations at every turn of the era. Our dharma has an unchanging Atman. It is Sanatana, true. But that Sanatana Atma of our dharma passes from one body to the other, just as we do. Look at the Ramakrishna mission. This universal institution is a new body, is the latest body of the ancient spirit of our nation and our religion to help us realize our aspirations of this era. And how it was made possible? It was made possible by the Uha initiated by the spiritual teachers of this new era, who were well versed in Sanskrit and our scriptures. Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna might not be educated in English, science and mathematics which he disliked. But he was very much educated in our scriptures, he was educated in Sanskrit as well. He attended a traditional school and he was a Bahushruta. So from the Sanskrit viewpoint, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna was an educated person. So Uha stands for the ability to analyze and understand what is required and what is to be given up, what is essential and what is non-essential within the cultural legacy that we inherit. Again, it is our Uha which is going to make these reformed social institutions and religious institutions of our country to their grand success. Because Uha is the expertise to assimilate what is required and get rid of what is redundant. So, this expertise cannot come to a person who is not educated, who doesn't have a familiarity, some kind of familiarity and fair acquaintance with Sanskrit. So this much about the second prayojana of Sanskrit education. Now we come to the third prayojana third purpose of Sanskrit education according to Maharshi Patanjali, which is Agama. In this context, Agama is the divine ordination on each one of us to inherit and practice the traditional wisdom of the people of this country. Nishkaranena shadango vedaha adhyeyo jneyascha, says Maharshi Patanjali. Nishkaranena shadango vedo dhyeyo jneyascha. He quotes. It is a responsibility on each one of us to know and to own the cultural legacy of this holy land. एतद्देश प्रसूतस्य सकाशाद अग्रजन्मनः स्वं स्वं चरित्रं शिक्षेरन् पृथिव्यां सर्वमानवाः. Our Shastracharya Parampara repeatedly reminds us that it is our duty, a holy duty, a sacred commitment to receive and perpetuate the ancient wisdom of our motherland. To fulfill this sacred commitment, we have to be at least familiar and comfortable with Sanskrit. And the reason for this is given as the next prayojana, which is Laghu. Laghu means Laghu Upaya, an easy means. So Laghu, an easy means. So Sanskrit works as an easy means to acquire knowledge. Sanskrit grammar works as an easy means to learn Sanskrit, and the Sanskrit knowledge works as an easy means to acquire the wisdom that the traditional systems of knowledge in India offer us. If Panini's grammar is an easy means to learn Sanskrit, the knowledge of Sanskrit itself is the easiest way to get full access to the treasury of India's traditional knowledge systems. We should not be under the wrong impression that the traditional knowledge systems of India, which are mostly in Sanskrit, through the medium of Sanskrit, speak only about moksha, spirituality. No. That is a wrong idea. The spiritual wisdom is certainly the central theme of India's traditional tradition, different various ancient traditions of knowledge that India cultivated. Adhyatma Vidya is the central theme of India's Saraswata Saparya. But that doesn't mean that Sanskrit is only about Upanishads and Gita. Sanskrit has a wide variety of secular subjects also to present in front of us. Sanskrit has a plethora of subjects to offer us. This is because Sanskrit remained as the de facto language of almost every systematic study and research in this land for millennia. So, Sanskrit learning paves a smooth way to enter a wide variety of secular subjects as well. The next prayojana of Sanskrit education is asandeha. Asandeha means sandehasya abhava, absence of sandeha, absence of ambiguity. Unambiguous knowledge, nisandigdham jnanam, asandigdham jnanam, yathayatham jnanam of India's past is a must if we want to be successful seekers of knowledge. I will explain. See, dignity and honor and other purusharthas cannot come only through certificates and money. It needs that real education which Swamiji speaks about, the manifestation of perfection already in us. For that to happen, we have to imbibe some noble qualities. Like in the words of Swamiji Maharaj himself, Atmanishtha, Shraddha, Vairagya, Viveka, devotion to God, and above all, love for our country, love for our motherland. Unless we know the characteristics of our motherland, how can we love her? We do not know what our country is, what her characteristics are. We cannot love her. Swamiji says, history itself bears testimony to the fact. All the soul elevating ideas and the different branches of knowledge that exist in the world are found on proper investigation to have their roots in India. This is a very famous statement made by Swamiji Maharaj. Our nation's history doesn't begin from 1947. India's state machinery began from 1950, the Republic Day. But India as a nation existed centuries back, millennia back. It didn't begin from even 1857. Our aspirations, our inquiries, our experiments, our findings, India's holy traditions and conventions, they continue through centuries and centuries. We are not going to be in agreement with everything that our ancestors thought and did. No, because our civilization is an innovative civilization. But we must learn the lessons that India's past wants to teach us. Ancient, if you learn history properly, you will understand. Ancient, classical and medieval India speaks to us all predominantly through the language of Sanskrit. How many epic poems, how many epigraphs, how many manuscripts still exist in Sanskrit, yet to be explored, yet to be understood. So, India's education in India is incomplete without Sanskrit. The unambiguous knowledge, a definite understanding of what India's past wants to convey is not possible without a decent familiarity with Sanskrit language. So, these are Rakshohagama Laghva Sandeha, the 5 main prayojanas of Sanskrit learning. These objectives that Patanjali speaks about while framing his study of Sanskrit grammar still remain relevant. What is more, we will be actually redefining the plan and purpose of Sanskrit, plan and purpose of knowledge cultivation in our educational systems by granting Sanskrit its rightful place in our curriculum. Time is... So I will call your attention to one more point and conclude. Yes. Just one more point. See, among the Indo-European languages, you heard about Indo-European languages, the languages which have some similarities, some commonalities, right from, say, Bengal till Scandinavia, Britain, Denmark and such countries. So this is a belt of different languages which have some linguistic features which are very common. So these languages belong to one family of languages called Indo-European languages. So among the Indo-European languages in general and South Asian languages in particular, Sanskrit has a very special linguistic salience and unmistakable importance. So let us, for the time being, keep aside the religious importance attached with Sanskrit and focus only on this linguistic preeminence that Sanskrit has among the regional languages in India which are still learned and used. We can easily find, if we look into these languages, there has been a continuous pro-Sanskrit shift, a continuous Sanskritization of the words and idioms which exist in these languages. And this trend of pro-Sanskrit shift or Sanskritization continues to happen unabated even today in a modified way. We know for many centuries our languages drew words from Farsi and Arabic and other languages also for political and social reasons. Now, at present, English occupies that position. And these regional languages in our country are in a continuous tussle to maintain their originality and a specific Indian identity. But in spite of all this, in this scenario, all these main regional languages of our country still look upon Sanskrit as their common source of vocabulary. Look at our common parlance, our scientific nomenclature, our polite expressions, our poetical outpourings, our political braggings. Just listen to media. Even the unparliamentary slip of the tongue, which we often we come across. Everything is heavily loaded with Sanskrit words and idiom. So, even a little effort on our part to invoke this language of rishis to our imaginative mind will make our imagination sublime, our creativity sublime, and our articulation an eloquent voice of Saraswati. Just as Mahakavi Kalidasa says, Tasya Vaktrantarat Gadya Padyatmika Bharati Nisaret Tasya Leela Saro Varidhi Tasya Kelivanam Nandanam Tasya Bhudevata Tasya Girdevata Kinkari Tasya Lakshmi hi kinkari, Girdevata kinkari, Tasya Chatnyakari Shri Swayam, Mahakavi Kalidasa writes. So this is the result of cultivating the Sanskrit language and invoking the blessings of this language into our creative mind. So I will conclude. Sanskrit revivalism is an undeniable fact in our country. Anyone who is mindful of new arenas of business opportunities, entrepreneurship, anyone who is mindful of this social media influencing even will not miss this trend. For this reason, as well as for the fivefold noble purpose which I have already described, let us pay attention to the ongoing Sanskrit renaissance which is happening in our country. Sanskrit has a time-tested pedagogy. Only Sanskrit teachers have to constructively employ their presentation skills and be always updated about latest trends in the field. So brothers, young students, let us reframe the ambience of our educational institutions, our homes, by making the Deva Bhasha reverberate through our classrooms, reverberate within us in our mind. Madhura Mohana Samskrita Bharati Mukharita Bhavita Diha Bharate Punarapiya Mudara Puratana Pratimukham Vidadhatu Cha Mandiram. Thank you all for your patience. My humble pranams to revered Maharaj is present here.
For such an enriching deliberation on Sanskrit language, and we indeed hope to incorporate Sanskrit in all the aspects of our lives.